We're talking to Laura, lead singer of the Mynabirds, here on Country Pocket. Um, we're talking about the album It's Okay to Go Back If You Keep Going Forward, which is a mouthful for an album title, but it's also like a pretty profound statement. So if you're going to make it a sentence, you might as well make it a profound one. Uh, Tell me about your attitude towards healing.
Oh, you went right in the deep end first, huh?
I did warn you.
I know, I appreciate it. My attitude towards healing is that it's never done. There's no such thing as being healed, right? I think that I've been in therapy for God, I don't know, over 10 years, and previously before that for another stint, and have been really interested in healing from a very young age through spiritual modalities, various religious modalities, and then like psychological modalities. And I find the human experience really fascinating. I think that we are all operating from some place of trauma. And the more we can look that in the eye and work to heal that within ourselves, I think we heal the whole world, which is like sort of the Buddhist concept of like be the change you want to see. So yeah, I think it's a process of continuing to go back to the original traumas. Like you get triggered, you go back to the traumas, and then you think you've healed, but it's like a loop, it's like the loop of time. That's what I think about it.
Yeah, so one of the songs I wanted to focus on was Ramona, Patron Saint of Silence. And you start that song kind of worried about the damage you could do speaking up. Take me to that point in your life.
Well, I wrote that song after I had not written a song for about 7 or 8 years. And I kind of thought that, maybe all my songs were just dried up. Maybe I'd written every song that I had to write, and that was it. And I sat down at the piano and started singing to this fictional patron saint. Or, I sometimes I come from the Tori Amos school, which I think a lot of like songwriting is unconscious and subconscious. And so I trust that whatever's coming out is coming from like a deep and honest place. And I thought, well, maybe there is a patron saint, Ramona. Maybe Ramona is a real saint that I heard about sometime and don't know about. And I looked her up later and I was like, no, this is not a real saint, but this is a saint in my life. And so this idea of um the times in which we hold silent. Okay, so in sorry, I'm going to take a step back, talk about going back to go forward. um I think that in survival mode, right, we have the four F's: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And silence is a sort of freezing that we do, and it keeps us safe, right? So I think in that space I realized that I stopped writing because I had encountered some big trauma in my life, and I needed to just sort of stay frozen for a while to be able to muddle my way through it, to survive through it. And so ultimately the song is a thank you letter. It's a letter of gratitude to whatever force it is that helps us maintain a silence while we heal, that helps protect us while we heal. And also it's a letter of gratitude to the power of our voice, and literally like the worlds we could destroy when we finally are ready to speak out. And it feels really entwined right now with the release of the Epstein files, and a lot of survivors of sexual assault and abuse that we're witnessing around the world. And people who wanted to maintain a silence and an anonymity to protect themselves and their livelihood. And now that's been taken away from them, as we've seen, some of these unredacted videos or photos that are coming out that are um, showing victims' faces, and revealing their identities. And the truth of the matter is, though, that they have enormous power in their voices. And the ways in which they can destroy these abusive systems that have been, unfortunately at work for a very long time. So to me, that feels like part of it is my story, and part of it is this collective story of what we can tear down with the power of our voices.
Yeah, by the end of the song, you have found the encouragement to speak and you take on the role of a volcano. Um, Sort of a different attitude. Is this a good destruction like you sort of were hinting at?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, right before we got on the phone, or on the Zoom, I was thinking about that. And I wrote a couple of today's Valentine's Day, which I think is like a perfect day to talk about trauma and talk about love and talk about, what is worth destroying, and is that an act of love, or is that, what does that look like? And I kind of consider myself a Buddhist, and I really struggle with that. Like, what does it mean um, to be a force of peace and love in the world? And the truth of the matter is that some things need to be destroyed. And I wrote just before we got on this call, destroying the old world to make way for the new one is also an act of love. And I think I was embodying that as the volcano in that song, which is like, yeah, sometimes we simmer in our anger and our rage until we can't take it anymore. Um, but another little poem I wrote is, when our outrage is rooted in love, we cannot fail. And so I think there's something about that. It's like, you even think about the Hindu god Shiva, right? Which is like a god of destruction. And it's just part of the cycle of life. It's like some things need to be composted.
Yeah. You got that patron saint encouraging you to speak. That's I'm assuming you don't actually have a saint you're speaking to. So what is that force that tells you, hey, it's time to speak now?
Oh man, it's interesting. I was always encouraged by my mom to sing. And I think there's something, I've been thinking about this a lot, this kind of like um, lineage of voice throughout human history. And I feel like that's part of what I'm singing about, which is, it's not just my voice or your voice or the voice of this time. It's like, what does it sound like? What does it look like when people who have been oppressed, repressed, finally recognize their own worth and speak up for themselves? And that's something we witness throughout all of history. And, I think of it when I think of Maya Angelou and her writing, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And, she talks about, in her childhood, she didn't speak literally, I think, for like 6 or 7 years. She was a victim of sexual abuse by someone in her family. And she went completely silent, and then she learned to speak and to sing. And it came from this place of not just her own value, but realizing, like, speaking for the value of the collective repressed, the collective oppressed. And so that's when I sing to that saint, I think it's whatever that power is, whatever that um it's kind of where, as humans, we turn from feeling like we're worthless to recognizing our worth, and then to doing something um that honors that. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the topic of abuse, um, you unleash what I think might be, I'm gonna call it the darkest song I've ever empathized with. Um, I think anything worse than that, I've just shuddered at. But this one I saw where you were coming from. Um, and you start out by calling someone a creep, sort of in the most explicit imaginable way. Um, you're talking about a man with power. You're talking about someone who seems like they can get away with anything. So, you know, people kissing up to them whenever they get the chance. So I guess the question um, is it difficult to sort of watch that real life scenario play out all the time?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Drinking Song. And to be honest, that's a song that I wrote in 2016. And I wrote it during the Me Too era. And I think that I, like many people, became very aware of abuse and trauma that I had suffered personally and I had witnessed and was talking in circles among other people where there was like a real reckoning, right? Of just things, people, like systems of power that are really harmful. And again, I can talk about it in light of the Epstein files because it's directly connected 2026 to 2016. Like this was the beginning. 2016 was really kind of the beginning of opening this very deep wound that unfortunately so many of us share. And um, after I wrote, actually, maybe it wasn't, sorry, it wasn't 2016. I think I wrote that song in 2018. But the realizations from it were coming from 2016. But my point is, I wrote that song and I didn't know what to do with it. I was so disgusted by the song. I was so disgusted by the feelings that were coming up inside of me, which is, I'm talking about an abuser in the music industry, right? It's about um, watching someone says, "How's your new ingenue? Is she loving you blind? Heard you gave her a piece of your spotlight. Guess she owes you a couple of nights." And it was kind of something that I was witnessing in the music industry, across the music industry, and many of my friends were witnessing, where um, it's like a younger and a younger person keeps getting ushered in, and what that exchange looks like. Like I knew what that exchange looked like. And it was kind of seen as okay because it's rock and roll and this is just what happens and everyone's getting a little something and isn't that great? And I knew personally that it wasn't great, that it wasn't an even exchange. And in fact, oftentimes it wasn't consensual, for many of the people experiencing the abuse. And so I sang the song out of so much anger and I didn't know what to do with it. And I decided on this record that it was finally time to speak about it. And honestly, I sort of put it out and didn't say much about it. And when you wrote to me and said, "Hey, I see you. I see where you're coming from. And it's so dark and I empathize with it." All I can say is thank you, because it's such a dark place to come from. And I think that being able to share those really dark spaces with people through music is one of the most healing things we can experience. Um, and yeah, I mean, just even recently, Casey Wasserman, who was found in the Epstein files, who runs a booking agency, and you have Bethany Crescentino from Best Coast and Chapel Roan, who left Wasserman because of these realizations. It's like this shit has happened for years. And it's from the power systems um, that go from the music industry to political power to whatever, Bill Gates, which he's been revealed to be a creep who was giving his wife STDs while he was sleeping with underage girls or whatever. I guess we don't know exactly their ages, but it's just this like energy in the world of people just taking and extracting and just taking whatever they want. And whether that's from young people's sexualities, whether that's like the rape of the earth by extracting whatever fossil fuels or whatever people want. It's like the same kind of energy. Um, and yeah, for me, I was like, I can't abide this anymore. And there was this really dark desire. I heard myself asking for it, which was just like, I wish I had some scar to prove what happened to me. And I know that so many people who are survivors kind of wish the same thing. It's like the only person who's your alibi in the worst nights of your life is often an abuser, you know, and they're never going to admit it. So it's sort of you against the world, and it's what you decide you want to do, because the only power you have when you walk away from that situation is how do you want to react to it, right? And so for me, I decided, I wrote the song and I felt like I wanted to be able to speak from that collective voice that is, again, both mine and this collective voice of survivors everywhere, to say, we see what's happened, we see you, I don't worship you, and you know, we all deserve better. um yeah, it's a hard thing, because I think for me, um what my wish for the whole world is like real healing, right? Like we started this conversation about healing, and my wish is, of course, for myself to heal, for anyone who's been a victim of sexual assault or abuse to heal. And I also wish for all of the abusers to heal. And from a Buddhist standpoint, oftentimes, you know, like Pema Chodron, who's one of my favorite Buddhist nuns and teachers, and she talks about the best thing you can do when faced with an abuser is stop their abuse, because we have to remember that not only are they hurting other people, but they're hurting themselves too. And if you come from this place of like deep loving kindness, that's what you want. You want the whole thing to stop. You want people to stop uh, operating from a place of being triggered of their own traumas and just like replicating harm and perpetuating harm in the world. So I guess that's a lot to say. I don't know if I answered your question. I just ranted for a while. I think I blacked out and just ranted.
Well, it was certainly a powerful rant. Um, there's this there's this moment when you see a new person being put into that same system, and there's almost an expression of you know let it happen, and then
Well, there's an expression of
and
jealousy,
then
which is embarrassing, you know,
yeah,
like that.
it's it's so dark. How do you, I guess, put yourself out there in that way to be able to express a thought that dark? I mean, is that one you'll perform at a show type of thing? I mean,
I haven't performed it at a show yet. I Fiona Apple wrote this really incredible song on her last record. And after I heard that song, I was like, oh, she expressed a similar feeling in such a different way than I did. And I think that I just let that emotion be completely raw and it's certainly unpolished, as you know. It's not trying to be a good thought. It's not trying to be the good girl in the room. It's allowing all of the thoughts, the dark thoughts, to come through. Um, and the song used to end, just with the repeated chorus, which is, please make it bleed, give her a scar she can show off, something you can see. Like, I think that what I really where that song really comes from is feeling like, oh my God, did this really happen to me? And if it did, Like, am I crazy? Have I lost my mind? And maybe if this happens to someone else, I'll feel less alone and we can commiserate over it. Like, what a horrible thought. Um, and so when I recorded the song for this album, I changed the end of it, which is like, don't don't make it bleed. Like, don't give anyone a scar. I don't want I don't want this to happen to anyone else in the world. I don't want anyone to experience this hell. Um, and I think that allowing both that original thought and then the like the more evolved, more healed thought to exist together in the song, I think it's important, you know? Um, yeah, it just, I think that it's not neat, it's not tidy what people experience when they're suffering through abuse, when they're healing from it. And I think part of the healing process is allowing the darkest thoughts to bubble up and to get free, you know? And so that was my process in that song, which is like, this is a really honest experience. And I'm sure I'm not alone in it. And I think that if I can say it out loud, hopefully anyone who hears it will feel less alone.
Yeah, it's it's good to be able to it's good to be able to go down a dark path and then pull back out because um it's really you're not going to get through life just thinking the good thoughts, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, but hopefully you can get through life without ever letting one of the bad ones truly take hold and, take something crucial away from you.
Yeah. I think that's so important. I think that when we name things bad and we bury them, you know, it doesn't really help our healing. I I once was talking to a friend of mine and he said he had been doing some oh shoot, what do you call it? The tapping therapy. Um I can't think of what it's called right now. Um shoot, I'll think of it in a minute. But he was doing this therapy and he realized he had some like unresolved trauma from his childhood. And he was doing this meditation and like he kept trying to get closer to it and get closer to it. And he said he would get into this place where he would just cry and cry and cry and he couldn't get past it. He just couldn't get past this one spot. And he thought if he could just get past this one really traumatic thing, then he could heal. And he was telling me about it. And I started laughing and I was like, hey man, have you ever thought that maybe your role in that moment is not to try to get past it anymore, but just to comfort yourself, just to go to your inner child and like hold your inner child and say, it's okay. I'm sorry that you ever had to feel that way and you never have to feel that way again. Like it's this idea of like, how hard do we push ourselves, you know, in this idea through to this idea of healing versus like finally stopping and giving ourselves the comfort that we deserved in those initial moments that we weren't getting, you know? So to me, that's how I feel about it. It's like you allow the dark thing to come up and I don't let it overwhelm me because I say, I can now, as a more healed person, go back and give myself the comfort and the love that I wasn't able to get in that moment, you know? Um, and that's very helpful to me. So I hope that feels helpful to someone else.
Yeah, yeah, it takes an awful lot of a lot of a lot of grace in that situation that you really have to uh, grant yourself through all this. Um, so for anyone who is ready to be hit with this particular truck, here we go. We're going to play Drinking Song and we'll be right back with Laura of Mynabirds.
Sorry.